Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Political Reflections, the instrument in support of trade exchanges, INSTEX Europe, is set to test the boundaries on Iran, reports Foreign Affairs. We've spoken about this before. This is the super clever wheeze from Federica Mogherini, the special purpose vehicle to facilitate trade between Iran and Europe in particular. With the European Union's blessing, the three states established a special channel that shields trade with Iran from US sanctions. The Instrument in Support of Trade Exchanges, or INSTEX as the channel is called, holds out the possibility that Europe can yet salvage the nuclear agreement's core bargain, that Iran was to limit its nuclear activities in return for the normalization of economic relations. The preservation of this arrangement will depend not only on the modicum of European Iranian trade that INSTEX might help preserve, but on whether Europe can navigate a narrow path between what Iran expects and what the United States can tolerate. In recent months, dozens of international companies have left Iran. The country's oil exports have halved, its national currency has tumbled, and inflation has soared. Iran's parliamentary think tank has issued a bleak forecast suggesting that in the more optimistic of two scenarios, the country could expect minus 2.6% growth this year and minus 4.5% next year. Red Box Wire reports the US is weighing more Iran sanctions over trade with Europe. I wrote about this on the 13th of May when I said President Trump has been a big proponent of financial coercive sanction warfare, and its expression vis-a-vis Iran is its apogee. I was describing Iran as being at the Hunter-S Thompsonian edge. There is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. These US demands basically constitute total Iranian surrender, not only to the US but also to Israel and Saudi Arabia. Badr Kuma wrote, if there can be a lethal game of Russian roulette in international politics, this is it. Prime Minister Abe is going to Iran, and apparently President Trump spoke with him this morning, and the question is, how authorized is he to come up with a deal? He could probably come up with a deal and just rename it the Trump deal, and it might wing it. Salvatore Mundi is being kept on the super yacht Serene, owned by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The yacht's location as of May 26 was in the Red Sea off Sharm el-Sheikh, according to Bloomberg ship tracking data. Its provenance has been questioned, will remain aboard MBS's 439-foot Serene until the Saudis create a planned cultural hub in the kingdom's Alula region, ArtNet have said. I wrote about the Salvatore Mundi in November last year when I said MBS, who then was the alleged owner of Leonardo da Vinci's Salvatore Mundi, a painting of Christ as the Savior of the world, shows Jesus in Renaissance dress giving a benediction with his right hand raised and two fingers extended while holding a transparent rock crystal orb in his left hand. The rock crystal orb, of course, reappeared during Trump's visit to the Desert Kingdom. The painting is currently in the Louvre in Abu Dhabi because of the optics. That was then. It's now on the Serene. Of this $140 million purchase, did not sit well with being the son and heir to the kingdom. The king is called the custodian of the two holy mosques after all. I also mentioned that he's the proud owner of the Serene, which he bought for 500 million euros in 2015, while vacationing in the south of France. Bruce Rydell alleges MBS sleeps on the Serene off Jeddah because he too lives in fear of his life. Interestingly, Saudi Arabia's headline PMI rose to 57.3 in May, the highest since December 2017. And if you've been following global PMIs, that's an outlier to the upside. My article over the weekend, of course, which I read to you, was Hugh Masekela. I want to be there when the people start to turn it around. And I was describing what was happening here in Africa. Quoted Kobo 3, who said police tear gas Malawi protests against Mutharika's election, theft, aka the TIPEC solution. In Liberia, demos against corruption, where shutters the internet. In Sudan, military slaughter 100 in continuing pro-democracy protests weeks after Bashir fell. In Algeria, Bouteflika ousted by protesters. What's up? And then I said, indeed, what's up? And I was talking about Khartoum and its beautifully perfumed revolution, which has now been clawed down. I then turned to South Africa and the RAND and the ANC dispute with Ramaphosa and his team. Zimbabwe dialing up Madame Lagarde finally. Zambia, I asked, is it a cashew nut moment? And then I was talking about rare earths and how I'd missed that opportunity to buy these cheap stocks, rainbow rare earths in Makango. And I ended by quoting T.S. Eliot. Here we go round the prickly pear, prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response, falls the shadow. Life is very long. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. For thine is, life is, for thine is the. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Bloomberg, when he tweets, markets listen. Our interview with Zhu Ziyin. I've spoken about him severally. He is a geopolitical outlier and probably the only fellow in China trusted to tweet, interpret, and critique in real time. Chinese newspaper editors moving markets with his tweets. The US is bulking up Coast Guard in the Pacific to counter Chinese fleet. Touted increased operations in the Western Pacific, thousands of miles from American shores, as China's Coast Guard and civilian fishing militias increasingly assert the country's territorial claims. The ships will allow law enforcement and capacity building in the fisheries enforcement realm, Fagan said. The whole Chinese Coast Guard has been a very powerful asymmetric way for the Chinese to project power, and obviously the Americans are seeking to respond to that.